Kendo Itsuka sighed. I'm starting to resent 1A a little bit, and I'm not sure if that's Bakugo's fault or Monoma's. Class 1B generally got along pretty well. Sure, they had some small arguments every now and again, but as class rep, Kendo quickly dealt with them, and most of the time the class had a positive vibe. And then 1A went on a long field trip to the Midoriya Foundation and left Bakugo behind for them to deal with. Now, despite his reputation, they didn't immediately hate Bakugo, while Monoma did, but that's only because of his weird 1A thing. Because Kendo liked to think her class was an accepting group, that they wouldn't immediately judge people based on things like that. She never got the chance to actually see if that was true, because the moment Bakugo ended up in their class, he immediately let his dislike of being in a class of rejects barely able to pass the piss-easy entrance exam, filled with people that had shitty quirks that would make a sidekick burst out laughing. And that was just the first 30 seconds. It had now been about 2 weeks, and everyone had had enough of shit by week 1. Even Pony, and she was the nice one. He absolutely destroyed them in training sessions, oftentimes going way overboard, and then immediately gloating about how great he was and about how trash they were. Every time anyone tried talking to him, he would call them shitty extras. And may whatever higher power existed in the world help the person that tried calling him out. He would curse at the top of his lungs, let off explosions and threaten murder until Vlad told him to cut it out. As for whenever he was put into a group exercise, you just couldn't work with him. He literally would not cooperate, so one of two things happened. 1. Bakugo would do the whole exercise by himself and win, or 2. Bakugo would try to do the whole exercise by himself, and fail because it wasn't a combat-centric exercise and combat was all Bakugo was good for. Overall, the more time Kendo spent with Bakugo, the more questions she had. How did 1A put up with this for months? How did Midoriya put up with this for years? How did UA expect them to deal with this for 3 years? Why didn't UA just expel him for the obvious behavioral issues he had? Why didn't Midoriya press charges and drop-kick Bakugo's career off a cliff? Why has no one decided to really take Bakugo down a peg? Alright class, today there's something special for you all, Vlad said, taking his place in front of the classroom, with his hand on a stack of papers. Do you all remember the Midoriya Foundation? Immediately they could feel the mood in the room drop, half because they recalled the last time they went there, and half because of the sheer hatred coming off of Bakugo the moment that name was said. Sensei, I don't think we can forget that place. Setsuna cringed. Are we gonna do that test again? Tagura asked enthusiastically. I'm itching for a rematch with Clifford the big black asshole. Why on earth would you want to go back there? Manga asked, his head turning into a question mark and exclamation point. If I never have to face that hellhound again, it'll be too soon. No more demons. Pony said, shaking her head. Fortunately, we won't be sending you back there, Vlad assured them. Instead, we have something much more pleasant. You see, the Midoriya Foundation has a technopath in their care, who has decided to make a video game. Not a small one either. Thanks to their quirk, they can easily develop games that would normally require massive studios to create. As such, Midoriya himself asked if UA would cooperate and lend them the rights to use our staff and the first-year students. This includes 1A and of course, all of you. Except for Bakugo, for obvious reasons. Whoa. Really? Manga shouted, his head now just an exclamation point. We're gonna be in a video game. Ah heck yeah, Tagura shouted, pumping his fist into the air. Immediately the whole class broke into excited chatter, the mood now higher than it was before as everyone voiced their excitement. And naturally, since everyone was a bit too happy for his liking, Bakugo came in and ruined it. What the hell are all you extras so happy about? Bakugo shouted, causing everyone to go quiet. You get told you're gonna be in a shitty game made by one of Deku's brats, and you get all happy. That's fucking pathetic. There was a moment of silence, as everyone took in what he said, and then immediately ignored it and went back to talking. Hey, don't fucking ignore me you damn extras. Bakugo shouted, unleashing some explosions from his hands to try and get attention, but to no avail, as everyone was done giving him what he wanted. Attention and validation namely. Now everyone settle down, Vlad said, causing the class to go quiet. This is a great opportunity for you to learn about publicity, image rights, and contracts. Speaking of which, these are the contracts you have to sign in order to lend your image to the game. Read them thoroughly, there'll be a test about its contents later. Ugh hi, groaned many of the students. Groan all you want, but signing contracts is an important part of being a hero. Don't start Bakugo. Vlad warned when he saw Bakugo open his mouth. If you don't learn how to navigate these things, then you'll end up in a horrible situation. I've heard of certain heroes being swindled out of billions of yen from misreading contracts, so read this one carefully. Obviously, Midoriya isn't going to try and skim you, but this is just so you can get familiar with contracts. Yes, sensei, responded most of the class. Bakugo, I'll be giving you a different contract. It doesn't do or mean anything, it's just so you don't get left out of this. Vlad told him. TCH. I don't need to fucking practice how to sign contracts. I'm not a fucking idiot like the rest of these dipshits. Bakugo seethed. And besides, I'm gonna hire someone to do all that tedious shit. Not right after you graduate, you're not, Vlad told him firmly. Most heroes work as sidekicks for at least a few years before they move on to full-time hero work, in which they are typically the ones in charge of the paperwork. And even if you work as a hero right out of the gate, you're still going to need to work for a few years before you can grow an agency big enough to have people work for you. Yes, even All Might had to do his own paperwork for a while. But even if you could completely avoid signing contracts and put all the work on someone else, for the most important things, it's better if you do it yourself, because putting it in the hands of someone else is a big risk. Especially for someone who very easily earns the contempt of other people, like you, Bakugo. Grrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr right, but I'll never admit it. Anyway, as I said before, look them over thoroughly. Take in every legal phrase and word. If you don't understand something, Google it. Vlad told them, before picking up the papers and handing them out. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. After that, the rest of the class was spent quietly studying contracts and signing where needed. Now it was lunchtime, and Bakugo was sure that 1B was down in the lunchroom, merrily celebrating being in a video game. Not that Bakugo would know, seeing as he was currently on the roof, eating his lunch alone as usual. TCH. What the fuck is up with all these fucking extras? Bakugo growled to himself. They think they're fucking better than me. Bakugo just didn't understand what was going on. Everyone, literally, everyone at UA looked at him the same way. Like he was lower than dirt. Like they were better than him even with their shitty quirks. Even after he beat the shit out of them, they all still looked down on him. Why? Ever since he moved away from his old school, nothing has been the same. No one respected him anymore. No one tried sucking up to him. No one knew their damn place. And he refused to listen to that. He was in a bubble crap because there was still something that was absolute. People. Respected. Strength. Both the strength of might and strength of will. Mirko, Hawks, even Endeavor. And especially All Might. People practically worshipped All Might for his strength. Even some villains loved him. Even all over the world, someone like Star and Stripe was considered an icon for women around the world. The only people with power that didn't get respect were villains. And he wasn't one of those. Villains could have physical strength, but not the strength of will. They couldn't stop themselves from indulging their urges. Their urges to steal, urges to maim, urges to kill. He could. There were so many things he wanted to do, but he had the strength to stop himself. So what if he kicked Deku around a few times, but that was because the fucker looked down on him. And he still did. But now it was different. Now Deku had power. Bakugo lived his life with a gun pointed to his head, and Deku's hand on the trigger. At any point, he could pull it, and end him. But he didn't. Why? Because he was waiting for him to fail. He gave him a chance to succeed so it would be all the sweeter when he lost himself, and broke one of his arbitrary rules. Then he'd pull the trigger, and end his dream. Well, Bakugo was going to make him regret giving him the chance. Because Bakugo was going to become stronger than even All Might, and then no one would give a shit about what happened in his past. No one will give a shit about anything Deku has to say. As it should be. Suddenly, Bakugo's thoughts were interpreted, when the door to the roof burst open, and Monoma strutted out. Well, if it isn't no one's favorite main character, Monoma said cheekily, giving him a shit-eating grin. Fuck off, leech. Bakugo snarled at him, once again popping off some explosions to try and intimidate him, but to no avail, as Monoma continued to strut up to him without a care in the world. Now, no need for the show, we both know what'll happen if they see even a singe on me. Monoma chuckled, looking down on Bakugo, who's sitting against a wall. Bakugo got up, and glared at Monoma, not saying a word because he knew he was right. I can only imagine how scary you must have been in your prime, Monoma said cockily. What the fuck does that mean? I am in my prime. Bakugo shouted in his face. No, no, you are not. Monoma replied, his grin growing even wider. Your prime was back in middle school. Back when you could do whatever you wanted. Back when you were surrounded by background characters and minor villains. Enablers who allowed you to think that people would like you just because you have a strong quirk. Although to be honest, no one ever really liked you, did they? Shut up, Bakugo growled, his palms smoking with rage. Make me, Monoma challenged. Yumi, sparring match after classes today. You're fucking on. Bakugo smirked, overjoyed at getting a chance to kick Monoma's smug ass. I've kicked your ass before, and I'll do it again. Last time I made a mistake. One I won't be repeating, Momona stated confidently. This time, we'll show you just how much better 1B is to your arrogant 1A ass. Bring it, Bakugo challenged. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. This is stupid, Kendo said. Bakugo and Monoma were staring each other down in one of U.A's rocky arenas. Both boys were in their hero costumes, and ready to throw down. On the side was the rest of 1B, sitting on the bleachers and spectating. What are you talking about? It's about time that asshole got put in his place. Toguro shouted. Beat him up. Pony cheered. Don't lose again, Monoma. Setsuna yelled. Shut it, extras. Bakugo snarled at them. Don't worry everyone, Monoma said with confidence, his grin never leaving his face. I have a foolproof plan. Oh really? Bakugo cackled, a psychotic grin plastered on his face. He crouched down and got ready to fight. Come at me. Monoma smirked and rolled back his sleeves, revealing he had copied Harry Ren's quirk, Scales. Heh, that idiot just showed me his entire hand. Bakugo thought to himself. He knew Monoma could, as of now, only store 3 quirks. The first was Scales, which he'd just shown him. He was almost certain the second would be Steel because it was one of the few half-decent quirks in this class and would allow him to fight him for a little bit, and of course, he was going to try and copy his quirk. Because duh. Monoma tried beating him with his own quirk before. And he failed because Bakugo was just so much better at handling it. This match was decided before it even started. Immediately Monoma opened fire and launched dozens of scales at Bakugo, like bullets coming from his arm. Bakugo dodged the scales, using his explosions to propel himself forward, expertly dodging the scales, exploding himself left and right to dodge the scales, quickly getting himself close to Monoma. Once Bakugo got too close, Monoma stopped using scales and started using steel, covering his body in steel. Predictable. Bakugo smirked, as he launched himself at Monoma, and tried to launch an explosion in his face. Monoma ducked and allowed Bakugo to fly over him. Bakugo then used his explosions to shift himself mid-air, positioning himself above Monoma and was about to unleash another blast. Monoma rolled to the side just in time, the explosion Bakugo unleashed into the ground, grazing his arm but not doing too much damage thanks to steel. He then quickly turned off steel, and used scale again, shooting more scales at Bakugo. Bakugo used an explosion to push himself out of the way, barely dodging the scales, before continuing to fly across the arena, Monoma forcing him back using scales, trying to keep him at a distance. Heh, fucker hasn't even touched me yet. Bakugo smirked as he glided around the arena. I just need to get close to him and start laying it on. Bakugo rocketed up into the air, dodging more scales, before letting off a much bigger explosion behind him, blasting himself towards Monoma much faster. Monoma's eyes widened, as Bakugo came at him. He had no time to switch to steel, so he just put both his scale-covered arms in front of him, and took a small jump. Boom! Bakugo came at him, and blasted Monoma with a huge explosion, easily shattering the scale armor on his arms, and doing quite a bit of damage to his arms, leaving burns and bruises on them. Since Momona wasn't touching the ground, he was blasted way back, rolling across the ground away from Bakugo, as he switched from scales to steel once again. Monoma flipped himself upright, and dug his fingers into the ground, stopping himself from getting blasted back further. However, Bakugo was relentless, and he was only a foot away from Monoma when he finally got his bearings and got to his feet. Boom! Monoma grit his teeth as he took an explosion to the chest. Steel protected him from the heat, but the force of the explosion was so powerful not even steel could defend him completely. He tried to rush forward and grab Bakugo's arm, but Bakugo exploded himself out of Monoma's range, before exploding himself forward and blasting him in the face. Boom! 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 Monoma kept trying to each for Bakugo, trying to grab him, but Bakugo was too mobile, and always retaliated, with a powerful explosion. Kaboom! Bakugo unleashed an even more powerful explosion, right at Monoma's chest, and knocked him to the ground. Ack! Monoma groaned, wincing in pain as his body was now a pile of hot, smoking metal, breathing heavily on the ground. Bakugo pointed his palms at his face. You lose, leech. You didn't even manage to touch me this time. Monoma gave a pained laugh, while he still tried to catch his breath. You really are an idiot. That's enough, Bakugo. He's dash. Kendo got up and tried to intervene, but Monoma cut her off. Your quirk is amazing, really. But it'll only get you so far. Monoma continued as he deactivated steel. This whole battle has been one big representation of your entire life. Using sheer power to get what you want, dominating those around you, while looking down on them. Doing whatever you want. Until suddenly dash. Then, Bakugo's gauntlets glowed purple, and Bakugo's arms were forcibly pointed at his chest. It all blows up in your face, Monoma smirked. Bakugo only had time to look down in horror, as the pins on his gauntlets were pulled. Crack boom! An explosion bigger than any before it detonated, point blank, at Bakugo's chest. Enveloping him completely, and making a path of destruction in the direction the gauntlets were fired at, that ended with the blast hitting the back wall of the training area, and breaking it open. When the blast and the smoke died down, Bakugo could be seen on the floor outside the training area, bloody, bruised, burned, and beaten. Barely holding to consciousness. Oh! Bakugo groaned, as he fought to stay conscious. The only thing keeping his mind off the incredible pain he was in was the sheer shock and anger he felt right after Monoma pulled that stunt. Ahahaha. Monoma laughed, as he pulled himself to his feet. Like I said, Bakugo. Your quirk is amazing. You of all people are definitely a main character. But even a main character can lose to a supporting character if their story is shit. Whoa! Most of his classmates cheered, celebrating Monoma's victory, with some of them even running out of the bleachers towards him. Holy shit, he actually won! Manga shouted, his head turned into an exclamation point. Heck yeah, you're the fucking man! Toguro shouted as he and a few more of his classmates surrounded Monoma, lifting him up to celebrate his victory. You kick butt! Pony cheered. About time that bastard got put in his place. Sure, Hai yelled. Hey, could you guys celebrate after we get Bakugo to Recovery Girl? Kendo shouted as she and Ibara ran over to Bakugo. Ibara, you get his legs and I'll get his head. Oh please, he's fine. He hates us too much to die, Setsuna said. Kendo sighed, as she and Ibara picked up Bakugo, and she saw him glare angrily at her. Put me down, I can still fight you fuckers. Bakugo wheezed, barely getting out the words, before coughing up blood. The fact that you are still conscious is amazing. But I really need you to shut up and accept your defeat like a man, while we get you to Recovery Girl. Kendo told him. Shut up. Bakugo tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond. His muscles wouldn't move. His body had accepted defeat even if his mind would not. Kendo sighed. Ibara, cover his mouth please. Ibara immediately used her hair to cover his mouth in vines. Thank you, Kendo told her. Believe me, I was doing us all a favor. Ibara retorted. May God help this lost soul, because I think he is beyond the aid of mortal men. Well, hopefully, this humbles him a little bit, Kendo muttered, as she and Ibara rushed to Recovery Girl. I can't believe you actually pulled it off. Tetsu shouted in awe. Well, it was pretty simple. Once I showed him I had steel and scale, he, being the arrogant prick he is, would assume I would save one space for his own quirk. When in actuality, I was hiding Poltergeist, saving it for just the right moment. Monoma explained. I just needed to get him to sweat enough to charge the gauntlets. Free cheers for Monoma! Toguro shouted. Monoma! 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 Some of the class cheered as they tossed Monoma in the air. Monoma smiled contently. He's sure that soon after this, he'd go back to being a side character. A support for everyone else. But for now, he could enjoy the spotlight and the feeling of putting an asshole in his place. Hopefully, by the time Bakugo returned to 1A, the experience of getting defeated by 3 third-rate quirks will have humbled him. Just a little bit.